I'm sitting here today at Grower's Choice Hydroponics, and I'd like to give you a few tips on growing marijuana plants in your backyard. The first thing we're going to need to do is figure out when we're going to start our plants, assuming that we're starting from clones or seeds. If you're going to start plants from clones or seeds, you'd want to start them in the beginning of April or the beginning of May, with the idea that you're going to put your plants out around May 2-4. If you're in southern Ontario, closer to the lake. If you're a little bit more northern in Ontario, like say Haliburton region or Algonquin Park, you wouldn't want to put your plants out before June 1st. This is because at nighttime, if the plants get a frost, it'll stunt your plants and it'll set you back. So it's just not worth it putting them out too early. The other thing that's very important when we put our plants outside is to make sure we put them in a spot where they're going to get enough sunlight to finish flowering properly. This is about 8 hours a day. Even more hours a day is good, but at least 8 hours a day if possible. The thing to remember too when putting a plant in a spot is that in the fall, the sun is going to shift. And you want to make sure that when the sun shifts, the plants are still getting 8 hours a day of sunlight. Another thing very important to remember when putting your plants outside is that you gradually get them used to the direct sunlight. This would mean, say, on the first day, only allowing them to have, say, 1 hour direct sunlight a day. The second day, maybe 2 hours direct sunlight a day. And after about a week, you can pretty much go full sunlight, and it should be okay. If you don't do that, what will happen is you tend to get a white bleaching on your leaves if you put them out right away. And you can even kill the plants if you put them out without gradually getting them used to the direct sunlight. The other thing that's really important is selecting the right strain for outside in our climate. Our climate tends to have a very similar climate to like Afghanistan. So we tend to be more suited for indicas as opposed to sativas. One of the nice things about indicas are that they flower quickly, they tend to be durable for our type of climate, and they also stay relatively short. So if you're in your backyard, you don't really want to plant 16 feet high so the whole neighborhood can see your plants and stuff. So you stick more towards indicas. Sativas generally tend to be more equatorial strains, so I would personally stick. Hybrids that lean towards indicas are fine too. An example of this would be like Purple Kush would be a good strain for Ontario because it's mainly almost a pure indica. Another good strain for Ontario might be Pink Kush. Another good strain for Ontario would be Blackberry OG. These types of strains, they would be pretty good. There are some sativas that are okay, like Durban Poison, for example, tends to be okay, or Cinderella 99, or Grapefruit, or even a strain called Crinkle. These are acceptable sativas for Ontario, but only because they tend to flower very quickly. Another thing to remember is when planting outside is if you're going to be in your backyard, I like to tend to stick more towards organics. But if you're going to be out in the bush somewhere, your plants, so pests or wild animals could be a problem, you may want to stick away from organics because sometimes organics can actually attract pests and bugs. A good example of a fertilizer for out in the bush would be this slow-release fertilizer by Dagda. It's really nice. It breaks down in about 30 days, very high in nitrogen. Or this one by Backcountry. It's a very nice fertilizer as well. Another thing to remember is when you're outside, a lot of people worry too much about insects and bugs. Always remember when you're outside, there generally tends to be a balance in an ecosystem. So you may see 1 or 2 little bugs, but usually it never gets into a big infestation because there's natural predators out there that keep everything in check and in a nice balance. So, and remember, if you spray a bug poison on a plant outside, you're not only killing the bad bugs, you're killing the good bugs too. And then when the poison wears off, quite often, then your plant could be voraciously attacked because there's no good guys there to protect them. The other thing that's very important when you're planting outside is to be aware of the weather patterns in the fall. Because if the fall tends to get very cold and wet, then you want to check your plants regularly because if it gets very cold and wet, you're going to be susceptible to mold or bud rot. And once you get that, It's really not a good thing. So you gotta, if it's cold and wet outside in the fall, really check, make sure your plants are not getting moldy or bud rot. If the weather gets sort of more into an Indian summer type of condition, then that's really good. Then you don't have to worry so much. But just be aware of the way the weather is in the fall. Cold and wet, you got to be very on top of your game. This basically concludes my general tips. It's not overly in depth, but hopefully this can give you a little bit of help with getting success in gardening outdoors. Thank you very much. Peace out. Hope this helps.